Is it common for teenage boys to have an incel alpha manosphere anti-progressive phase? I've often heard about how lots of young teen boys get sucked into things associated with incelism and hating progressives. Some of the boys at my school seem hold much more minor ideas of this type, like saying I gotta listen to a woman talk for 3 whole hours when learning about having to watch a 3-hour-long lecture video. Although I haven't heard anyone calling themselves an alpha, calling girls whores, or calling others snowflakes and such. Personally, the most anti-progressive I ever got was having a problem specifically with the name of feminism itself, but never further than that. I'm not sure if that even counts as against progress though, since my motive for that thought was that a name change would clean it from the sum of the damage done by both feminist extremists and people who thought the whole movement revolved around the ideas of said extremists. My reasoning was that the extremists would refuse to go along with the change out of simple stubbornness and delusion, and people who were progressive would just let the name feminism rot while coming out under another name with a clean slate. I wasn't even sure if there was a dedicated website or hub for feminism, which would only make it harder to clarify feminism's goals and make it easier to haters to slander feminism and hinder progression. It's common to be angry and confused. All the rest is circumstantial. I'd say it's common but not deeply rooted. Teenagers also respond to being told they are hypocritical. Sternly and if possible deflect with humor, guide these thoughts out of people or challenge them. I don't think this is common, but I also don't think it's exceptionally rare. There's probably a lot of geographical variation. Kids absorb the ideas around them. Teenagers also like to experiment with different ideas and identities. Part of growing up is figuring yourself out. It's pretty rare for the conclusions that someone draws at 16 to remain unchanged at 18, let alone for the rest of their lives. Based on anecdotes of friends' teen brothers, it seems to be on the rise these days. Never heard these ideas from my friends in my teen years, but it could have been more covert back then. The incel alpha manosphere is the only thing speaking to these boys that doesn't insult and criticize them. It inflates their egos, lifts them up, makes them feel powerful. The more time passes, the less I am surprised Trump won in 2016. People think that was a phase we're about to tie off the last knot on. It's not. Someone else will come along next time, and they won't be such a dumbass. God, being a teenager these days sounds so fucking confusing and annoying. Even more than when I was one in the mid-90s. If you were angry or wanted to be edgy, you just got really into punk or metal. I've had an edgy, embarrassing piece of shit phase when I was a teenager. I've thankfully grew out of it. A lot of my peers who I used to be in the social with seem to have grew out of it as well, 'cause they stopped posting altogether. I think a lot of teenagers probably engage in casual misogyny, like making sexist comments and pretending that is a type of joke. I don't think this is the same thing as being in the incel or manosphere crowd, though it shouldn't be excused for any reason either. There's a difference between kids acting stupid and kids engaging in actual extremism though. Talk to your boys, people, and raise them to respect women and everyone else. Do you think being anti-progressive conservative makes you an incel? Or alpha manosphere, whatever that is? I think a lot just do it to be edgy, controversial, unique. I remember being a communist at 14 and thinking I was such a rebel. The new generation of men are pushing back against the notion that simply being a man is all sunshine and rainbows, as we face our own discrimination and hardships. This is especially true when examining the worst pitfalls of society: suicide, homelessness, and being imprisoned. They're sick of hearing about how much privilege they have. when their reality often doesn't reflect that at all. We don't need to demonize or strawman men with insulting words just because they feel this way. In fact, doing so just makes more and more men gravitate to this conclusion and style of thinking. The left has been villainizing men for years for seemingly just existing in the incel gymbro. Subcultures are the only place where they don't feel like they're getting constantly shit on. Put that in with the fact that teen boys are impressionable and you've got yourself your answer. It's probably a counterculture rebel thing because progressivism liberalism is the new mainstream norm so prevalent. Gen Z is very right comparatively speaking for their age. It's almost certainly due to how pervasive liberal ideology has become. Pendulum is coming back the other way basically. It depends on what they're exposed to. Teens don't come up with this stuff in a vacuum. They see adults and their politics and gender relations and model themselves accordingly. Teens who lack progressive role models, examples, and advice can fall under the influence of these toxic demagogues. It is important to present proof that a positive progressive alternative exists and works, and help them understand why those other ideas are not the answer they claim to be. I don't think it's very common personally. Rebelling against the establishment is pretty common in kids. The equivalent when I was a teenager was getting super edgelordy in their atheism. Not the atheism part. The going full edgelord about it part. I suppose the concerning difference is that there weren't coordinated groups of adults deliberately trying to stoke a particular brand of teenage rebellion in order to further their repressive political goals. Considering the number and range of categories you have mentioned, yes, I would say some level of engagement with some of those things is common. Yeah. I don't think being a full-fledged member of them isn't. But those ideologies are all about appealing to teenage boys. So them having some appeal to teenage boys isn't surprising. I'm sure whatever is happening to our male youth it's men's own fault. This is why I am always talking to my kids about school and their feelings. Also we always talk about the news and things like that, so they know what's good and bad. My son 12 has taught me that kids at his school love Andrew Tate. They have no idea who he is, but because people hate him they love him. My son knows who he is, so he hates him. Education is the best thing to keep extremism away. Yes. This is what happens when you make it clear that someone's problems aren't worth so much as listening to. Luckily most of us bounce back. That's what happens when you keep pushing masculinity bad on young men. Some will conform to your ideal. Others, the more intelligent ones, won't let it affect them and not even get involved. Then you have the ones that go nuts and full on incel. It was bound to happen. Hopefully, they grow out of it. Guys don't particularly care to be fed all the original sin bullshit being peddled by the extreme left these days. When you go around telling straight white males or anyone with any of those traits that they're guilty of being evil oppressors purely because they're straight or white or male, don't be surprised when they tell you to go to hell no matter what you want. Don't be surprised when they switch sides entirely. Progressivism is an ideology, and isn't just synonymous with good changes. And one of its current toxic tenets is a general hatred of men. It makes perfect sense for boys to feel attacked and push back against hateful ideology. Common in a pure statistical sense? Yeah. Common in a sense that the phase is because of the age development stage? No, not really. As a humble reminder, having different political ideas from oneself does not make the other person a bigot or an incel.